All right, so we can get started. So just as a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. It'll be uploaded to YouTube shortly after. And, uh, your participation in this meeting is an agreement to abide by the OpenSSF code of conduct. All right, cool. So before getting into the agenda, wanted to first throw it over to you folks just to see if there's any updates or anything that you wanted to bring up, or also you can add it to the agenda in the document.
I just threw it down as the last item on the agenda that there are a few PRs that have been sitting out for a while that need approval.
Oh, yep. Yes, actually, there's one there that I realize I should also comment on. All right. So actually, why don't we do the PR one first, just because that's sort of top of mind. Are there any specific PRs that, because I know a lot of them have been getting updated and
Yeah, the Git mirror / Tecton triggers / let's see, the refactoring of the make file, all those kind of lead on to each other. And so waiting on the Git mirror to get approved so that I can rebase, and then the Tecton trigger gets approved, and then take the make file out of draft state. So all those are ready to go. It just needs someone to say yes.
Okay, yeah, we can do that. I can definitely take a look there. Oh, it's weird. Like it says, like you requested my review, and I'm like, I didn't get the, or at least I don't think I got the alert on that. But it probably gets lost in the 10,000 notifications from GitHub. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Do that. Actually, one of the PRs on my end regarding the architectural diagrams, I don't know if there's any like specific way to say the files in this directory come from this other thing that is also open source, because it's like it's under, technically I think the architectural diagrams, they are for the CNCF. Yes, it's all the Linux Foundation, but I want to make it clear that, hey, it came from the CNCF secure software factory reference architecture, and they're based on, like, those diagrams that are in this thing are based on that. And so I want to make sure that it's attributed to the CNCF. I guess maybe I just put a file in there and just say, hey, the architectural diagrams in this are based on these. I just know that it's based on the Creative Commons attribution license. I just want to make sure I don't bother somebody by saying, like, hey, we took those documents, took those diagrams.
Sometimes I throw a README in the same folder saying these files have this license or came from this source.
Okay, yeah, I think
I'll have it in the same folder. That way, if you browse into the folder in GitHub, it jumps right up. Okay,
cool. I mean, yeah, and it's one of those things too where I technically made the diagrams for the other thing, but given that it's yeah, I don't know, figure it out. Cool, yeah, thanks. Are there any other PRs that folks are waiting for reviews on?
The only other one I've got out there is the internal registry one. That one stands alone, so that's an easy one to do a one-off review on. I know the updated version of Tecton chains, that one's been failing in CI, and we've been having challenges trying to figure out how to make it fail on our side. And so it's, I've run into some issues, and I've seen some kind issues out there where, not kind, Minikube issues where Minikube actually has the storage driver crashing on my machine that crashes all other stuff. Caverna crashes in the process, and then that kills the next thing. I don't know if that's what's happening in this case.
Is this because of a new release? Is this something with the new release, or is it just in something broke somewhere? Like
if it is, I can't reproduce it on my machine. That's the challenge. It's like it's only failing in CI.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, and it only takes just updating to 12, right? So I don't, if you just do that, it starts to fail on CI. It doesn't fail for me locally. So
So if it back on 11, it's fine.
yeah, it's fine.
Interesting. Okay.
I have seen a few race conditions and things. That's the other reason I want to try to get some of these PRs up, because the make file takes out the race conditions. Everything's in order again. So I don't know if that would clear up any of this or not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's worth exploring. It's also going to be tied to some of the stuff I think we want to bring up later in the meeting about just sort of like, hey, as we begin to look at packaging this up and so on, what is that going to start looking like? Hold on. Okay. So next up, were there any other comments on that? Otherwise we can move to the next topic for now. Okay, so next topic is the logo. Let me just, for folks who, so it's in Slack, but and I have it attached in our Slack, but just to kind of give you guys, give you folks an idea. Oops, why did I share screen? So this is one of the logos that they built. This is sort of the most recent concept that they built here. And this was some of the older concepts. So I think a lot of folks had, at least in the Slack channel, sort of said they like this one for some of the cases where you want just a simple logo and you just want to say, hey, Fresca, this seems pretty good. And then this is potentially good for, you know, as a mascot and everything else. Do folks have opinions? Do folks have thoughts on this? Anything that they, otherwise, did we want to just say, hey, this seems pretty good. Let's move forward with getting the whatever images we need to have this on the project page.
Can we have t-shirts?
So once we have this logo, we can ask the Linux Foundation to make shirts for us. Yes.
Very cool.
Skipping right past the stickers, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think now that we have a logo, we can start to, you know, a lot of people are like, hey, once you have a logo, it's a real project now. Now you get to, you know, push forward. Cool. Any objections? Does everybody think this is pretty good and we can just kind of move forward?
I kind of
It's
laugh
really
at my
good.
hat, but I'm not objecting to it.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm not necessarily objecting to it. It's also a, hey, do folks like this logo? I like the logo. It looks like, you know, I think they did a pretty good job. It's like, you know, you got a little bit of the OpenSSF Goose stuff. You have the fact that we're a pipeline, sort of secure pipeline. It's a shield and a legally distinct, you know, cap that looks similar, but is legally distinct from a certain plumber who, you know, Super Mario or whatever. Cool. So that was one of the other things. Awesome. And I'll tell them that's good. And I'll just try and get the diagrams for that all, sorry, the images for that all set up. Cool. Next up. So next up was there's some stuff about Salsa 3 in order to based on some of the changes that came into Salsa and some of the source requirements in Salsa. Fresca is not really easily Salsa 3. Like you can get some information from it that would make it potentially Salsa 3, but the fact that we don't actually capture the source information in a good way sort of prevents it from it'll be no longer Salsa 3 when 1.0 comes along. And so I wanted to kind of get folks' thoughts about that.
Was this a recent change, or was that always there?
So it's unclear because there's a lot of like these like minor like actually that was always the case, but the wording didn't really make it clear, and so the wording was fixed or whatever. But we're making it very clear that in 1.0 the source needs to be identified, right? It doesn't necessarily need to. You don't need to have like the idea here is that the build that you have can even say that the source is something local with this hash, but even that we don't do in our thing, right? In material, like we don't include materials, we don't include anything like that.
Where would that be captured? Is that part of the materials, or is that going to be part of somewhere else in the actual
materials would probably be the easiest, but it could also, for example, be included in the build config if the build config itself is pulling down that source. If you can say, well, here's the build config and the parameters to the build config, and one of the parameters is this git thing, that's also okay. But in general, it's the materials.
So there's no standard for it though. So it can be in either location.
They recommend materials, right? Like you can infer it from the other one, but they do recommend materials because materials is very clearly like this is the material, this is where it came from, and so on. Yeah. And it also helps out with stuff like, if you include dependencies, the dependencies could be included as materials and so on.
And we're talking about this being included in the attestation that change producing
generates. It doesn't currently.
Yeah, because like just as a reminder, the big thing is in Salsa, they recommend the use of the Salsa attestation format, the predicate format, but you're not actually required to do that, right? You can go and do it some other way. So technically you could, as long as the information is somehow gleanable from, the thing there, you can have that information there. Like anywhere, like in any other area of the in any other area of the attestation, or whatever, right? And I think at some point in time, I thought that in one of our examples, what we had an attestation coming out of Git, and the attestation was, we had specifically said, hey, pull this revision. So that revision was shown as a parameter to the task inside of the attestation. And so, yes, the stuff was lost when we moved to, let's say, OCI, because once again, OCI is not pulling in all the elements from the pipeline. It's only pulling in that specific task. So it was only pulling in information regarding that particular part of the build. But I don't know, stuff has changed. A bunch of stuff has moved around. We've changed a bunch of the examples around. So now that we're sort of just pulling head, now we also lose that information as well. And so I think the thing here is we want to figure out a good way of saying, hey, how can we include some of that Git information? Is there a way that we can include it via the other elements of the Tecton? Like, is there, even if we have to like feed in some of the information into later tasks just for like as an environment variable so that we can then load it back, which is not ideal, but you'd want to get people's thoughts on it.
And the triggers PR, I'm building a specific Git hashes. I'm not building from head.
Okay, which one?
In the Tecton triggers PR, once that goes
Oh,
in,
okay.
that's going to start building the specific Git commit that you generate.
Okay, so that'll solve most of that.
But would that be included in the attestation?
It would be included with your source of the Git request. So if you say my source is this Git repo, it would be included in that.
Right.
I'm
so,
also
I
putting
mean,
in the image tag, but I don't know.
but that's
particular.
only going to be for that git clone task, right? That attestation
Yes.
generated only would have it, not the one that we upload to OCI, right?
Yeah.
So I think we
Well,
still lose that information.
Yeah, not
It-
necessarily, right? Like I do think that the fact that chains has this big bug here that they don't have a way of doing that. Like we still have the attestation. The attestation still gets uploaded to Recore, so the attestation doesn't get lost. It's not ideal.
The param is also there for you to use in other steps of the Tecton task, so you could pass that parameter if you needed to another step.
Yeah.
Something to think about if we're getting into, we need the full attestation of the whole pipeline, is we've got, at least our sample pipeline is doing not just a building of an image, but applying with a kubectl apply.
Yeah.
If you ever do
Scanning
something
and
like,
stuff too. Yeah.
well, yeah, scanning and things like that. If you ever do something that says, hey, we want to verify with the image controller that this thing has been signed and has all the valid data, you can't have that step be the deploy step within the same pipeline that's verifying it. It's got to be a separate pipeline at that point.
Right.
Or
Yep.
GitOps or something else.
No, I think that pipeline is not representative of how we would use it in a production environment anyways. So no one's ever going to deploy straight to a prod or something. So
The fact that there's a kubectl command in the middle of our pipeline terrifies me, but
yeah, so
I get
think
why we did it, but
I'm trying to think if there's a way in chains, but I don't think chains has the ability to know what other tasks are associated with that task run, I guess, right? That pipeline as a whole. I mean, like you said, I think if we move to a pipeline attestation, like create a whole, and it holds on to everything and creates a attestation at the end for the pipeline, then it wouldn't be an issue, because then, okay, now I know the pipeline, then I know all the tasks that are associated with it, and I can grab the parameters that I need. So in that case, it could clone information.
which Chains is looking at doing at some point there.
I don't know if it's moving. I don't think it's. I haven't
thought I
seen
saw-
any work, unless you have. I saw
thought
an
I saw
open PR.
something.
I saw an open PR a long time ago that hasn't been touched in a while. So let me see. There's a tech. Actually, where'd it go? Oh, unless it closed.
You can just make your build all one task, right?
Yeah, I know,
Well,
but it's not going to scale well, right? I think.
Yeah, you can't send off separate tasks to be executing at the same time. I found the other issue is that you can't effectively pass information between steps in a single task. That's meant more for passing between tasks in a pipeline. There's no real good
Yep.
support for taking the output of one step and passing it into the next step. That
Right.
doesn't seem to be there currently.
Yeah, the thing that I've seen in some of the tasks is what they do is like they'll create a new environment variable, and then the step in the next environment variable pulls, because like the between the steps, I believe the environments are still kept the same, right? Or am I? Do you know? Because I could have
Sorry,
sworn I
what
saw
was the question?
something. So that that environment, the environment is kept consistent through steps, I thought.
Yes.
So I think the thing there was that at least I could have sworn I saw either a pipeline or a task that yeah, so that I think we had some of these where some of these things had like some of these steps were passing environment variables between individual steps so that you could use the environment variable as like, you know, the capturing the output, I think. So for Matt, yeah, so we do like, we're starting to kind of, I think, build some of that sort of stuff out. I think we are getting a little worried that a lot of the Tecton stuff takes on the order of months, like for seemingly simple changes to kind of go through. And I think we're growing a little worried about the speed by which we can kind of make some of the changes. And so it's something that we want to actually probably bring up in an upcoming Tecton community meeting and see if there's something that we can start to do.
Well, I'm saying, well, sure. I'd love to still first, my first request, I think, if we can coalesce a list of issues or TEPs or PRs that are priority and prioritize them here, then I can discuss them with both Andrea and Pretty, who are on my team. Andrea being in the governing board and Pretty on my team, as well as Red Hat, Vincent there, to see what we can get attention on these things. But they complain that they're lacking people to do reviews and things like that, to me. And actually, I think Pretty has been asked to train new Google people who are coming onto the project. So we're having a problem with experienced people there, just in general. So, but if we can get a priority list, we can see what we can at least track it in that order and let no downstream communities like this need these things.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think also on our end, I believe, not myself, but I believe like Parth and a few other folks, like, you know, I think we're more than willing to also step up more in, hey, what can we do to help out with the some of these things that are sort of taking a little long. For example, like, you know, Parth has you know, he's had some of the
yeah, so I have a lot of
Spire work.
Right. I have a bunch of Spire PRs that are open. That's a lot of changes. I mean, there's still some one PR just got merged. It took about like 7 months or so to actually get that one merged. So it's been a very long process. The package finally got merged. So there's still like let's see, there will be at least 4 more PRs associated with that TEP. So those are right. I think it's yeah, like, you know, like Mike is saying, like we can step up. I think
I think
myself,
I think that's going to be required because, you know, in the path of Tecton,
yeah,
actually was diverging towards more of a general workflow engine as of end of last year, which to my dismay. And having people with both the maintainer knowledge of both Tecton proper in the inner workings and the security spaces you're dealing in, finding that cross section is very, very challenging. So absolutely need help. But
so what
if we can identify, and we know that there's a date associated with it or some urgency, you know, we can see what we can do, you know.
So is there a process to, you know, apply to become a maintainer, or how would that work?
No, it's based upon merit, you know.
I see.
But the problem is, you know, it's like people come by and, you know, dump TEPs or PRs. In fact, we have TEPs overlapping TEPs, and people come along and dump a bunch of code, and then they know it's not finished, so it's hard to know which ones to take seriously, you know.
Right. Makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I guess what's the merit that's needed in order to become a maintainer then? I guess like you know, Mike's saying, like we're happy to help out. I think Remy, I think you have some experience, especially with Tecton chains. So, and I think especially in this group, you know, we have a bunch of us that have studied the code a lot and, you know, modified a lot of the code. So I think especially, you know, like you're saying, both in the inner workings of Tecton as well as in terms of supply chain security. So.
Well, you just need somebody who is a maintainer to sponsor you and acknowledge your work, but it's like being there weekly. It's just presence. It's presence and fixing not just your PR,
right? Okay.
But, you know, whatever is on their priority list of things to fix.
Makes sense. Okay.
But you know, clearly, you know, we've got one governing board member and 2 maintainers I mentioned. that, you know, if we can justify presence or figure out how to carve out a space specifically, if these are chains related or if these are correlated, you know, maintainers can be, you know, done via subdirectory or subproject or whatever as well. I don't know, you know, I don't understand how that's done today in Tecton, but
Understood. Yeah, so both B Mitch and I both linked the same thing, but yeah, so the pipeline or attestation has gotten merged actually. So I think that's some testing we can do there to see if that kind of helps us. And I think it will. I haven't gone through the PR myself, so I think I'll probably some testing and stuff like that to see what it kind of generates. But this might solve that whole issue for salsa level 3.
yeah, so, you know, to my priority issue has been fan out. The problem is we have matrix, but matrix didn't behave it didn't behave the way we wanted it to. So we're trying to actually do a fan out type of thing. So that's our priority right now. So. Which brings up an interesting issue too, because if you do fan out, then not all pipelines see all variables necessarily, and then you have perhaps different basically it's pipelines and pipelines in theory. And so then how do you track those different threads to end? And you have the perpetual finally problems of finalizers don't go in the order you always want them to go, and there is no ordering to finalizers. So anyway.
Yeah, I'm not okay. Yeah. So yeah, that makes sense. And so yeah, if there's anything we can do, you know, like we can probably even just right now, Parth, I know that there's a bunch of PRs that you're still looking to get merged and some of the other things, and I think it might be useful for us to just sort of compile some of that stuff. And make sure it gets over to the Tecton folks.
Yeah, full disclosure. I mean, I just had a presentation yesterday where we're trying to get salsa level compliance in our own internal pipelines in IBM, and we use Tecton, but they're not using chains. They're not using any of these things because it doesn't meet at least our people's requirements in terms of evidence collection. So it's just interesting.
Yeah. I mean, long term, we want to have chains do most of the evidence collection, or at least sign off on the output that, you know, pipelines itself, you know, whatever evidence pipelines itself is collecting. And ideally we want like kind of more of what we're sort of seeing come out of like GitHub Actions, where it's a little bit easier to sort of define like the inputs and also know like, hey, when a pipeline gets spun up, you know, these are the things that are like, I have you know, identifiers based on the OIDC token about like what triggered the build and so on. And there's a bunch of stuff on some of that level. Cool. So Parth, do you so hold on one second here. Yeah. Oh, okay. So TEP84 was just merged, so it hasn't actually been released yet, which is okay. I
It's
just
not.
wanted to.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it literally got merged 17 hours ago.
Yeah.
So
Okay, cool.
I
Yeah,
saw
just-
it open for a while. I wasn't sure if it was being worked, so it looks like it was. So that's great. Okay.
yeah, awesome.
Let's
Yeah,
work for us.
yeah, that helps. Cool. Yeah, we can definitely get back to you, Matt, with a list of things, and then also, we probably have a list of questions on, because I think Parth, once again, I'm not super, I'm not doing a ton of the upstream Tecton stuff outside of a couple of small bug fixes and that kind of thing myself. But I know Parth and I know a few others have been pushing some larger things upstream, and we want to know, like, what can we do to make sure that we're not like coming off as like, hey, we know everybody has way too much work on their hands. We don't want to come in and be like, well, we have this big thing and we need it merged, please take a look at it.
Yeah, I think it's going to require presence. I mean, it goes like, I know. So let me just say, this is, to me, I tell people this is the most important work group or in OpenSSF. That's what I say, because you're trying to put all the pieces together in your hands-on keyboard. And I know Tecton's, critical path for the foundation, the runtime to bear this out. But the problem is the view of the Tecton people, pretty especially, is saying they don't know which ones are meaningful, which ones require attention, and they're like, we don't know who this person is, So just maybe even just attending a meeting regularly to give an update, and just that's helpful.
Yep.
Yeah, I think the Spire stuff is very, very public. I think we've attended a bunch of meetings, and I've talked to pretty personally. I've talked to a bunch of other maintainers on their, I'm blanking on their name right now, but so yeah, I think they're all like aware of who we are and the work we're trying to do and push forward kind of thing. So it's yeah.
So actually, I do have a question. This is just for my own benefit, because these things get lost in the myriad Linux Foundation calendars. Approximately, like, when are these meetings? Just so I can, and sorry, which calendar are these meetings on? I assume the CD Foundation one, or is it on its own for Tecton meetings? Parth,
Actually,
you're on mute.
Yeah, I just so there are multiple calls, but whatever one the core API working group was the one I think that needs to have presence.
And do we know which calendar is this a separate here, let me, I found the Tecton community thing. Let me pull this in. I see shared calendar, and I will add this calendar to, I see it's its own thing. Okay, cool. Yeah, I'll add this calendar to actually the links for this calendar do not work. Oh, there we go. Okay. Add. Okay, so I see it now. Okay. I mistakenly thought it was under the CD Foundation calendar. Okay, I see them now. Okay, I see the Tecton API. Cool. Yeah, there's definitely, we can try and get representatives from our group in these meetings to make sure, that gets done. Right. Let me also just. Okay, so in fact, there's one later today at 12 Eastern. Cool. Yeah, we could definitely start attending we can definitely check, we could definitely start attending those meetings and start pushing a little bit to make sure that people can see us, and I agree with you on the community meeting thing. It's much easier when you could just sort of tell somebody, yeah, no, we're definitely here, we're present, we're not just throwing some code at the wall and seeing what sticks. Cool. Yeah, that'll definitely help out a bunch.
And I'll talk with Andre and Pretty here about figuring out what the maintainer path is, given that they've had a lot of turnover lately, lost a lot of people. So yeah.
Sounds good. Thank you. Yeah, I think the next step is, I think I can probably take it as an action item, but try out the new chains, see what the pipeline attestations look like. I think that might help a lot, right? That solves the whole, the issue that you're talking about, Brad, having a single task or a single task run as a pipeline and all that kind of
Right.
stuff. I think
Yep.
that'll solve a bunch of things. So I think that's definitely an important piece to take a look at and integrate. So, okay.
Cool. Awesome. Okay. So that'll definitely help out with some of the other stuff. Yeah, and I'll show you, I'll send over, after this meeting, I'll probably talk with some of the folks off out of band and just make sure we have a good list of stuff and send it over to you. Cool. So what else?
We have the GCP environment. You want to talk about
Oh,
that?
right. Yeah. Do you want to show some of that off, Parth? Yeah. So just as a reminder for and for Remy in particular, I think we need to just get, because we don't have
Add
access
into it.
ourselves. We can't get into too many details yet, but the admins on that environment are going to give us can add you in there as well. But we now have an actual dev environment that is an open source dev environment. So the idea would be anybody who is like a maintainer in good standing among the group could have access to this dev environment to start doing some of the work. This is useful for a couple of reasons as a reminder. One is, hey, like I know that a bunch of changes have happened that will now make it much easier to run a lot of these things on MacBooks, the M1 Macs. But in addition to that, it's still like sometimes it's unclear, like, hey, is this because I'm running all of this stuff locally and it's not the easiest to all run locally, or is the issue because we actually have a weird architectural issue? And then it also helps us say, as we are looking at potentially a production kind of like, what would this sort of thing look like in production, right? Where we have, Tecton running, and then we have the Spire server running in a separate cluster, and we have like Vault running in a separate cluster, but we can still do all the nice fancy things. There's a lot of
yes. So let me show. Let me share my screen. So all right, can everybody see that? Okay. So I made it so, we just we're using Terraform here, but basically we try to make it as secure as possible. So it is generating a private cluster, a GKE cluster, that's only accessible via the Bastion host. So what happens is that, and it's using the identity aware proxy. So there's a Bastion host here that doesn't have a public IP either. Nothing has a public IP. So you kind of use the identity aware proxy in order to authenticate yourself, right, via your Google account. And once you have access, with the G Cloud CLI that's available, then you can access the cluster securely. So I'll show you that here in my thing. So here you can see that this is the GKE cluster here running. So I have all the components up and running already for Fresca. I think the problem, like, I think that's what I mentioned to you, Mitch, if you remember on the Fresca chat, that's like, hey, the pipeline is having an issue in terms of instantiating. There's an issue with this webhook. Seems like it's not getting recognized, and it's like when you try to load in the tasks, it's failing for some reason. So I still have to go debug this piece. But basically, all the other different components are there, and Kyber, NoSpire, everything is up and running. So in order to access it, so you can see here, let me scroll a little bit. So I right here, you can see I logged in, or I'm fetching. I mean, I'm already authenticated to G Cloud, right? So you can authenticate into from the CLI, you authenticate into the GCP, and once you do that, right here, you can see I'm getting the cluster, the kube config here. And then after that, I am SSHing or port forwarding via the Bastion host through the identity aware proxy. So once this happens, you can port forward, and then you can have a HTTPS proxy for the Kubernetes, right? So you can just export that out. And so every time you run kubectl, it's gonna go through that proxy basically to connect up to the Kubernetes cluster in the GKE. So that's how you interact with it. So everyone should have. I think B Mitch and Brad, I think you all have access at this point to this thing. I think Remy, you're missing, but I think, like Mike was saying, that we don't have full permissions on this cluster. So it's basically the admins will have to add you in, Remy, but we can get that sorted out pretty quick. So that shouldn't be an issue. So everyone can, and I'll send this information out in terms of how the connection and stuff like that works. But you kind of just log in via your own Google account, and we'll have full access, so we can start messing with this. If you want to create, if you want to create another private cluster to hold Vault and the Spire server and so forth, I think we can start doing all those kind of things. Having a much more representative, production-like environment that we can actually go test around with. But this is just now. Is this one single cluster? Same thing, and just have Fresca running.
What's the Kubernetes version in that cluster?
It's 1.21, I believe.
Okay. That's farther back than I thought it would be.
Let's see. Show. Okay, that can work. What was the command to do this? Isn't it wide? Oh, wide. What did I have over there?
Have to do some digging.
Yeah, I think it's O wide, dash O wide.
Is it -O wide? Okay, there you go. Yeah. So, sorry, it's 1.22.
Okay. And my fear was 125 got rid of features
pod.
that the Tecton pipeline doesn't even work with anymore. Pod security policy.
Right. Yep. Yeah, so we can change this versions around too. I think by default it came to this, but we can once you're instantiating the cluster, we can change the Kubernetes cluster around or upgrade, right? So it's not a big deal.
Yeah, now I was thinking along the lines of your error message you were running into earlier of things not working.
Yeah, it's strange. I'm not sure. It doesn't make sense why it's doing that. It shouldn't be, for whatever reason, but it's a very strange error, and it's happened multiple times. So it's not like it's like a one-off thing, or like the way Fresca installs like a race condition or anything like that. It's nothing like that. But it does it consistently every single time. So I'll take a look, but
At
either
this
way,
point,
everybody
nothing's
has
changed
access.
to me. Yeah, I've been fighting a bunch of these issues of things crashing and not running in different reasons. So at this point, nothing's changed to me. And I'll send out those commands, the G Cloud commands, basically to connect on the Fresca chat.
Any questions on that stuff? Pretty straightforward. Okay. Yes, and my Spire package, one of them did get merged yesterday, surprisingly. So that is actually moving along after a long time. So we're going to actually rebase. I talked with Brandon Lum yesterday. We're going to rebase some of the other PRs that we have open for Spire, and so that that they can get approved quicker. We'll make it breaking out some of the things and all that kind of stuff. I think we realize that it's kind of complicated, so it's if you break it down to smaller pieces, I think it'll make it a lot easier for people to understand and review. So that was a bad move on our part. So I think it's a lesson learned. But yeah, man, that's everything from me. Anything else, Mike, on your agenda, or I think we can call it early.
Yeah, we can probably call it a little early. So the only thing I was just gonna actually bring up is, so we're Parth and I will be demoing some of Fresca at KubeCon in about a month. And so we're probably going to be trying to make sure even if we have to, POC and like hack together a couple of things, we want to really make sure that we show off all the latest and greatest that we've done, or that everybody's done with Fresca, with all the stuff here with Vault, with all the other pieces, with the triggers, without all these things. And we really want to make sure that it's clear to folks. And also I'm personally waiting to hear back on, because in December, I'm going to be spending all of December in Asia. And it turns out also there's an open source summit in Japan in December. So I'm also looking to, I submitted a couple of talks for Fresca in open source summit in Japan as well. And if that gets accepted, we'll take take the show on the road. But yeah, just wanted to so if anybody has any things that they wanted to make sure it gets highlighted and yada yada, we're definitely open to suggestions here. We want to show folks how this thing has sort of progressed. It's like, hey, we have, a lot of it was sort of based on Tecton, and then we sort of built on top of Tecton, and here's all the different things that we're doing in collaboration also with, I think the thing that we're trying to also highlight is we're trying to highlight stuff like, hey, there were things missing from Keyverno, and we worked with the Keyverno team to get that addressed. And, hey, there was this thing that we wanted to, like the Spire stuff, and hey, that's kind of getting merged into Tecton and Tecton chains and so on. And while also sort of showing that this sort of thing is like, yeah, it's not as simple as, let's say, a GitHub action, but for folks who can't use GitHub actions, who it just doesn't fit the exact requirement, you can do, you have this thing that's nice and customizable and so on.
Oh, and one last thing I wanted to add is we are actually making progress on the runtime piece, the predicate, defining out the predicate, so that we can start generating those runtime attestations along with the salsa attestations, and then pushing that also. So that is also, there's actually a meeting, if anybody's interested, I can forward you guys that today at 3 p.m. if anyone's interested in joining, discussing that, see what the progress is and what it looks like, and it's providing general input. More than welcome. We actually have one of the guys from ChainGuard named Jed Salazar, I believe. He actually came from Tetragon. He actually was one of the main, he was a maintainer, and he worked with ISO Wayland for a while. So he has a lot of connections, a lot of inputs and everything. So it's great insight and all those kind of things. So if you're interested, ping me and I can add you guys to those meetings. Awesome. I think you can call it. I think
yeah.
Nothing else.
And I'll see you. We'll see everybody in about 2 weeks.
Cool. Thanks, everyone.
And we'll get on the PR stuff right after this. Thanks.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Cheers.